Hello and welcome to the first ever webinar that has been streamed to YouTube. So welcome to the Global Armed Man Session 1. My name's Tori Longdon, and together with Jamie Wright, we set up the Stay at Home Choir about 12 weeks ago now, which, where has the time gone? We feel like we've spent most of those 12 weeks keeping up with you all, because we now have 13,500 members spread across 64 countries around the world, which is just mind-blowing. So it's fantastic to have you all with us tonight. Some of you who were with us for our O Radiant Dawn project with Sir James Macmillan will recognise the two singers that we have with us today, but I will let them introduce themselves. But first, I'm going to hand over to Jamie Wright.
Hello everybody, and thank you again for joining us. We've already had a very exciting week of socials with all of you, so if you've made it to one of the first 3 socials, thank you so much for joining us. We are really excited about the next 10 weeks of this fantastic project. We've been rubbing our hands together in excitement for the last month or so, getting everything lined up for you, with the very generous help of indeed Simon Kim and also of Sir Karl Jenkins, who we will introduce in a matter of moments. This session, we will give an outline in a moment, and Tori will be hosting most of today. But this session is a chance to ask any questions you might have about vocal technique, about how we approach the hymn before action that we're working on this week. We've got plenty of opportunities to answer questions about the tech and the more involved side. So do get in touch on contact@Stay at Home Choir if you need any of those technical questions answered about how to do your recordings and things. I'll touch a little on that later, but in the meantime, I will hand back to you, Tori.
Great. So we'll come to Karl, our special guest, right at the end of this. But our 2 16 singers, you may have met them before. They are Kim Porter and Simon Berridge. And I'm going to hand over to Kim first, just to say a few words about her and how she sings.
Hi, lovely to be involved. Thank you very much. I'm an alto in the 16, and I've done quite a few choral workshops and stuff with the 16 all over the country when we do our choral pilgrimages. So it's lovely to be able to work with people who then hopefully come and listen to the concerts and get involved that way. So really looking forward to this, and great music, so it'll be fun.
Those people who maybe are outside of the UK, could you just explain quickly what the choral pilgrimage is?
Yes, it is a concert which the 16 take round Great Britain to hopefully all the cathedrals and large churches. So it's the same programme, and we just sort of go zigzag our way around the country throughout a sort of, I think it's about 8-month period, 7 or 8 month period during the year. And we love it. It's lovely to actually do the same music again over and over again. It sort of develops, and you get a different relationship with it throughout the year. So it's a nice thing to do.
And it's a huge undertaking, isn't it? 8 months. That's an enormous period of time. And I went to university in Durham, and Durham Cathedral is one of the venues that features year after year as a permanent fixture on the choral pilgrimage. Isn't that right? It
is, yeah. And that's my nearest town to me, so it's lovely when I get to do a home gig. So
a gig close to home. That's lovely. And Simon Berridge, tenor with 16.
Hi, that's right. Yes, I've been singing with the 16 for quite some time, actually. I sometimes try to work it out because I can't actually remember when I started, but I think it was 1989. So how many years did that make it? 30, nearly 31 years now, I think that makes it, isn't it? If my math is correctly. I've been singing, and I sing with Kim on a regular basis. I've also, both Kim and I both work with the Genesis 16, which is the training scheme we have. And the first time I met Jamie is in one of my consorts, so it's lovely to be working with him now. I've also been recently working with Tori, because she conducts some wonderful choirs, including the County Youth Choir for Hertfordshire, and so I've been very fortunate to be involved with them in those things as well. So I've really enjoyed that. It's down the road from me, and it's also, I come from Hertfordshire, so I have a bit of a personal investment in the place. I have to admit that I've never sung your piece, The Armed Man, Karl, and I've been looking at it and enjoying the performances of it I could find on Spotify. So I'm really looking forward to this project, to working on a couple of these pieces.
Thank you.
Simon, you have a daughter who sang in the National Youth Choirs of Great Britain, and the National Youth Choirs were the choir that was on the recording for The Armed Man. So there's a connection there.
Yeah, there is. But both of my daughters sang in the National Youth Choir, both Hannah and Amelia. So I think Hannah might be in there. I can't remember. I haven't had a chance to talk to Amelia because she's over in Holland working as a singer over there now. But yeah, Hannah's. I think Hannah did the recording. I've got a feeling she's somewhere in there and all that, alumni. So yeah, it's great. And of course, the recording I listened to was the National Youth Choir one. Was that, Karl? Is that the? Are there more than that? I didn't get to listen to any more. Are there other recordings of Armed Man?
Oh, no, there's only one, for which I'm very grateful and thankful.
Yeah, it's a lovely. Yeah,
I monopolized the market, but there was only one, and that was with the London Philharmonic Orchestra.
right, cool.
And of course, he needs no introduction. And last but by no means least, we have Sir Karl Jenkins. Karl, would you introduce yourself and then tell us about your wonderful work?
Hello, Karl Jenkins. I've got no idea who's out there, but maybe some of you have sang music before. I'm sure you have. Maybe I've met some of you. I'm sure that's possible as well. And we'll find out in due course. I'll say a few things about the Armed Man, the piece. First of all, the commission. It happened in 1998 when Classic FM, in conjunction with the Music Charitable Trust, asked for work to mark the millennium, 2000, and hoping for a century of peace and goodwill. Of course, that lasted about a day before it was back to normal again with conflicts everywhere. The text was conceived by the master of the Royal Armouries, a man by the name of Guy Wilson. And essentially it tells the story and the horrors of war from the beginning, build up to the battle and the aftermath and reflection, and then looking forward to a glorious and better future where better is peace. When I was writing the work, the global conflict, as it were, was Kosovo and the war in the Balkans. So the piece was the daily reminder of the horrors of conflict that you saw on television and in the newsreels. So the work is dedicated to victims of Kosovo. And in fact, I went there to conduct a performance a few years ago at the behest of the president, which was a kind of very emotional experience for them and for me. The premiere was in 2000 at the Albert Hall, and the work lay dormant for a couple of years before it kind of found its home with people, as it were. Partly due to Classic FM, the music began to be sung quite a lot. So back to Guy Wilson, he collated all the text, which is a lot more than I needed or we needed. So we sifted through them. And the work breaks down to 13 movements. I'll just run through them briefly. There were a couple of stipulations with regard to the composition. One was it had to qualify as a mass. They wanted it to be called a masterpiece. So we had 4 mass movements, which I'll get through as I read the movement list. The other was me to use the little melody L'Homme Armé from the 15th century, whatever, from Burgundy, the anonymous tune that many composers used as a setting, like a cantus firmus for for various masses that were written. And there are about 30 masses that were written shortly after that period. And ever since, there've been quite a few with that little motif, which says, "Beware of the armed man." And that appears in the first movement and the last movement. It opens with the armed man, which is kind of military, kind of very kind of full of trepidation about the oncoming conflict, as it were. The second movement is the Adhan, or the Muslim call to prayer, which has caused a few contentious issues in many places at various times, where the work has been banned because of the presence of the call to prayer. The idea of the work is that it's international, it's not specific to any creed or religion, it's for everyone. It's universal in its concept and in its text. But certain churches, in the main, objected to it. I say that since 2000, it's been performed 3,000 times, which is about twice a week somewhere in the world, every week. And the album has been in the UK charts for, albeit bubbling around the bottom somewhere, but it's been in the charts 17 years, which is quite a long time, crazy amount of time, really. But the Adhan caused this problem. One memorable one was the one I was invited to in Berlin, which is at the Dom, at the cathedral. And when the church elders got to hear of the performance, they kind of banned it. So it was transferred to the concert house in Berlin. And I was kind of guest of honor, so I went along and it was fine. But it caused a lot of furore in the press. And one defined German journalist wrote that this is the church that banned it, that 60 years ago was happy to have the swastika draped over the altar. So it's sometimes got a bit heavy in various places, and I've been asked to get involved, and up to a point I do, but it's the message of the music and the work itself that's important, not the fact that it's a Muslim call to prayer. Anyway, as part of the work, and some performances have been cancelled, and I've been asked to allow it to be performed without it, which I don't allow. And then someone else wanted to put something else in instead, composed by another composer. So that wasn't acceptable either. But anyway, that's the second movement, and it's always very emotional when we have a live, listening to sing it. Right, then we have the first mass movement, Kyrie eleison. That's followed with Save Me from Bloody Men, which is from the Psalm. Psalm 59, I think. Then the second mass movement, Sanctus. Then we come to Hymn Before Action, which I'll come back to. The seventh movement is the pivotal one, which is Charge, which is the kind of battle, if you like. And that's with text by John Dryden and Jonathan Swift. Angry Flames, the next movement, is by a Japanese poet called Togi Senkichi, who developed leukemia as a result of the Hiroshima bomb in 1945, wasn't it? 44, 45. Torches, number 9 is Mahabharata, which is the Hindu epic, which is a kind of ongoing, they add to it, and it's kind of universal and endless. Next, 10 is Agnus Dei, the mass movement. 11, Now the Guns Have Stopped, with text by Guy Wilson himself, because we had a poem earmarked for this, but rights were denied by I can't remember who the poet was now. But anyway, he wrote a very, very moving and for solo alto, very moving text. Then there's a Benedictus with a long cello solo. That's the movement most people think about when they think about the work. And the last movement is Better is Peace, which text by Mallory, some anonymous text, Tennyson, and Revelations, 21:4, which is the closing chorale. So from that, we are performing, correct me if I'm wrong here, Sanctus, Hymn Before Action, Agnus Dei, Benedictus, and the closing chorale at the very end of the piece. So that's the structure. Performances, as I mentioned, some have been caused problems with various church societies. Sometimes in the Bible Belt in America, there's been issues. Sometimes in liberal places like Holland. But anyway, that's precluded, not that many really. There's been 3,000. I've conducted maybe 100 of them. So the rest have gone out into the world and people do it, which is great. recording was by the National Youth Choir. And I'm told, apart from what you said earlier about Simon's daughter, I think there are some coming, others who sang on the original recording as well. Recording at Air Lyndhurst in London with the London Philharmonic Orchestra. And that's, would you like me to say anything else about it? Or I'll come back to Now the Guns Have Stopped. Not Now the Guns Have Stopped, Hymn Before Action.
Yes, I was just wondering before we move on to the movement that we're looking at this week, when you were choosing the sort of choral suite for the Armed Man, we've got Hymn Before Action and the Sanctus Benedictus Agnus Dei, but not the final chorale. Was there any, other than obviously having just the mass movements, were there any other reasons that you picked the choral suite as such?
No, it was mainly. You mean the mass suite for from the Man? Yeah, which was for some reason the mass movements, obviously. Was it called the choral suite or the mass suite? I can't remember. But anyway, choral suite. But Now the Guns Have Stopped was. I keep saying that Hymn Before Action was added as an extra.
It's beautiful
for you because you like it. There was no reasoning. It was I suppose to push the work more than the whole thing. It was like a cut down version of various pieces from the piece which people like to sing. So it was that really. It was more of a commercial decision than a creative decision.
Them as standalone set of pieces.
Am I still with you?
Absolutely, yeah, I can hear you well. I was just saying that there's they work well as a standalone set of pieces.
Yes, indeed, yes, and they've been done as such as well. Yeah.
So moving on to the movement that we're doing this week, and as we move through the weeks, we're going to focus on different movements from the 5 that we've chosen, which is Hymn Before Action, Sanctus Benedictus Agnus Dei, and then the final chorale. And Hymn Before Action has amazing text by Rudyard Kipling.
Yes, he was famous for, he was a journalist and a poet and a writer. And some of his most well-known work was, like, he wrote Jungle Book, that many people would have known from when they were kids, and grown-ups as well, of course. He won a Nobel Prize for Literature. I think he was the first British writer to do so. And in 1996, he wrote Hymn Before Action. He was very much a child, which is kind of current now with the slavery thing. Not that he was anything to do with slavery, but he's from that generation. And Hymn Before Action was a prayer written for troops on the eve of battle. And he was born in India and very much a child of that age, for the British Empire, I suppose. It was published by the Times, and Kipling was known as the laureate of the empire by many people. Obviously, the whole poem isn't represented in the work, it's just one verse. But it's very heroic, and it's also jingoistic, I suppose, to a certain extent. It's called a hymn, but it's a statement of, it's a cleverly written text, really, which is powerful, without being religious in any way. It's not a Christian text. Sorry?
No, it's all right. I was just jumping in. You carry on.
No, I was just going to say the orchestration throughout the work is quite big. It's like a romantic-sized orchestra. So there's triple woodwind and full brass and some percussion. And this is the whole setting of it. I think it's the first of it to set the music. It was called hymn. It's like Francis of Assisi hymn, I can't remember, sometimes hymns just mean the words, the text, rather than being a song. So apparently, Wikipedia tells me it wasn't set to music before, but I don't necessarily believe that. But anyway, it kind of set itself, really. It needed to be heroic and of a style, of a time. So That's all I can say about it.
Yes, you certainly get that feeling of being sort of swept along with the emotion of it all. I must admit, I had to look twice at the performance direction, Eroico. And then I was like, of course, like, you know, Eroica Symphony and all of this. And like, that's it. It's this heroic feeling behind it is key to the movement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's big and expansive. Quite filmic in a way. That's
and speaking of film, there is a film accompanying our learning resources, so that we can get that sort of expansive, sort of, I suppose, heavyweight feeling as we sing this first movement. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about who those people are and when that was recorded.
That was recorded in 2018, October, in Berlin. A film for use as a background to the armed man has been in use for a few years. People want to show the film when the music is playing, they can do so. It's like a video playback. It's not time locked or linked or anything. It just kind of floats there. There are some hit points you can catch with the music if you so wish to do. So having Owen, a film director from Cardiff, he runs a company called Rondo. He's a musician himself and a filmmaker. He does a lot of Welsh National Opera stuff and for S4C. He had this idea of making the Armed Man film. 2018 marked 100 years since the end of the Great War. So it was ambition to put this Armed Man performance on in Berlin, which he did at the Mercedes-Benz Arena, with singers from all over Europe. I think it's 30 countries, about 2,000 singers. And the orchestra is the World Orchestra for Peace, which was started by Sir George Solti a few years ago. Since his death, Gergiev, the Russian conductor, has been conducting it. And then I conducted it. I was the fourth conductor. Not that I consider myself a conductor in that sense, but I happen to be the fourth person who was involved with it, with them. They work very rarely. They're picked from various orchestras around Europe, and they choose to go for things they fancy doing, especially if it's involved with peace. And unlike most orchestras, the strings especially, they swap around during performances. Like the leader plays one piece and then she goes to the back and they move around. So it's very egalitarian kind of setup.
Amazing organization.
Yeah, it is. It's great. So Charles Kay, I first met Charles Kay when I did an album with Kiri DeCanio a few years back. And Charles Kay used to be a manager, as he was Scholti's. So I met Charles then, and he still looks up to the orchestra. So he's still the guiding light, as it were. So he lives in Salzburg. That is a very interesting book. And the choir. I said about the choir, didn't I? From all various corners of Europe.
And the orchestra is going to be the orchestra. I'm just looking at the YouTube chat now. I've not got a proper name for this person, but Super A Poet had asked us which orchestra would be accompanying us for our performance, and it is going to be the World Orchestra for Peace. And the connection we have with Charles is fantastic. And those players are going to be we're going to be using their footage to accompany us on this performance. Now, if you sang in the massed choir in Berlin and you are watching now, put your name in the chat and we can give you a little shout out. Because I'm sure there'll be several people. We've met some of them in our global socials already. Yes, so there we go. We'll be able to just loop back and give those people a shout out when they put their name in the chat. But it was an amazing performance in Berlin, and the footage is absolutely fantastic, Karl.
Yeah, it's wonderful to look at. Yeah, it is. And there is a DVD of it available if anyone wanted to look at it.
Great. So we've got a question from Louise Maisel, which brings us really nicely on to the next section of our webinar today, which is, do the singers from the 16 see any particular pitfalls or areas that we should be working on or looking at when we get into the hymn before action? So I'm going to ping it over to you guys. Is there anything that stood out to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think first of all, one of the things that we can look at quite carefully is the text, and that, because it's such strong text and needs to really come over very clearly. That was something that I was that I'm going to be looking at. I think ways of getting that across really clearly. And then there are the flats coming in, so sort of quite small intervals that can sometimes go a little bit wayward. So there's little patches of those that I would definitely be looking at, and hoping that I'll be able to get people through that bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And Simon?
Yeah, I was listening. I've listened to the National Youth Choir, obviously recording of this, which is very together, really great, and has got huge exuberance about it as well. And I was thinking about the phrasing that I think about. For instance, in the introduction, Karl, you've got a very lyrical phrase, and so. As well as the text coming across, I feel that there's a huge amount that we can do in terms of the phrasing to make it a really joined up phrase. So we've got a real strength of the sound and the continuation through it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
As everyone's together, as it will be. Can I just mention one word?
Please.
The word forward, bearing, at letter C, high lust and forward bearing. Some people think it's forward.
Okay.
But it's forward, which is in a person, it's someone who's difficult to deal with, or someone who's kind of contrary, and someone who's difficult. So it's an obvious, you'd think it's a misprint, but it isn't.
That's really good to know. There are a couple of other words that I'd like to look at. Simon, I've seen you. Let's go to Simon first, and then I'm just going to pick out another few words which might be worth clarifying for any non-English speakers around us. Okay. Simon.
Sorry, this is slightly going off course, but looking at you grew up in Wales, and your father, I believe, was a director of a chapel choir. Is that right, Karl?
Yeah. Correct, yeah. Correct. Yeah.
So, and then later in your life, you were with the Soft Machine band, which is a psychedelic rock band, I believe. Is that right?
Yes.
So I'm interested in the journey that brought you to writing in this style, really, because I think that's an amazingly broad thing. Obviously, you've got the choral tradition. Well, I just maybe wonder some of the things that from your choral childhood, what you kind of bring in.
Well, it is. It's like I've been a musical tourist all my life until recently. And as you said, my father was a chapel organist and choir master and a school teacher by profession. But I went to the local grammar school and played the oboe in the National Youth Orchestra of Wales. Wow. And then I did a Bachelor of Music degree at Cardiff University. So that taught me a lot of the craft of harmony counterpoint, fugue analysis, orchestration. So it's thoroughly trained. And then I discovered jazz in my teenage years. So then when I came to, after university, I came to the Royal Academy for a year, doing postgraduate studies. And then I worked as a jazz musician in London at Ronnie Scott's Club and with various bands like Nucleus, and then Soft Machine. And then after that, I wrote music for the media, commercials, which were kind of interesting because they're quite varied. And when I was doing commercials, many film directors who became famous were commercial directors, people like Alan Parker, Ridley Scott, Tony Scott, Hugh Hudson, were kind of cutting their teeth as commercial directors. So the commercials were good to look at, well made, and were little miniature kind of works of art without being pompous about it. And during all my time with writing music for commercials, I learned a lot about ethnic music, using old instruments from various cultures. And then the Adi Amos thing came up that I did, which was kind of multicultural. And then after that was the Armed Man. So I came back to that kind of thing by this route, having did a Bachelor of Music degree at the university, and come back to, this was the first piece I've written in any kind of genre other than jazz, essentially, or some commercial things, and TV commercials, of course. So there was the idea was then young man, and since I might be doing this kind of thing, kind of settings would be August, Herbert Martyr, Requiem. So to many people, it might be an odd journey, but I've always resisted categorizing music, really. I never thought of it in boxes, and it's one, we all use the same 12 notes, really. So there's good music in all spheres, I think.
And I know that Jamie will certainly agree with that. You're a very agnostic musician, aren't you, Jamie?
I absolutely am. I love your description of sort of being a musical traveller. I think that's it's such a helpful thing, I think, to be able to draw on different styles, different genres, different everything. I'd love to know how you feel this experience around everything else affects your work more recently as well, and whether you still feel you're drawing from all of that experience in the same way, perhaps, as to when you first made that transition.
No, I'm still drawing on it, and I still use a lot of. I recently did a recording, a set Miserere text, which I recorded with Stephen Layton and Polyphony, and we used in that various we use a lot of Middle Eastern ethnic instruments like darbuka, which is a kind of goblet drum, and a may, a double reed instrument. So I'm always looking for different sounds from around the world, if you like, that I use in what I do. And text, like when I wrote my Requiem, I set I used some Japanese haiku poems as well that kind of correlated with Requiem in terms of cherry blossom, the water cycle, and precipitation, and rebirth, and those kind of things. And Stabat Mater similarly had odd things coming into it. So one critic said to me that, which I took to be a huge compliment. He said that I was hugely manipulative as a composer. So I thought it was quite nice in a way that if you can write, if I can make people laugh or move by doing something, but he thought it was to my great discredit. But anyway.
That certainly sounds like a compliment to me, I think.
Yeah, and something that we are learning as we're moving through the different projects here at Stay at Home Choir is that you can, no matter what genre of music you're singing, you can still find within it at the same time joy and fun and serious, earnest music making. And those two things actually really do sit side by side. And it doesn't matter whether you're singing Motown, as we've been doing recently, or classical music, or really sort of highbrow choral stuff, that those two things really do sit side by side.
I wonder, Simon or Kim, whether you would expand on that. It's something we've done quite a lot, and I'm sure you'd agree. In the choral world, sometimes we can feel like we have to take things very, very seriously as performers, but actually that doesn't mean the rehearsals can't be fun and the process can't be really enjoyable and potentially sometimes a little bit silly. I wonder if any of you might expand.
I'll let you go first, Kim.
I'm a terrible giggler, and it quite often when we're, say if we're doing the choral pilgrimage concerts, there are certain little bits within the concert that become a sort of an in joke, and the audience doesn't necessarily see it, but we are enjoying ourselves. But yes, rehearsals, really silly sometimes, and Harry is extremely patient with us mostly. We make each other laugh a lot.
I would love to come back to this at the end of our session, but I'm conscious that we should look at some of the technical challenges specifically within the Hymn Before Action, and maybe to build on what we've just been talking about. We've got quite a lot of quite intense emotion to deal with in this piece. Simon, perhaps you could talk to us about how we can manage that without introducing vocal tension and sort of maintaining the legato line.
Yeah, I think one of the main things is the way that we approach the consonants. If you approach the consonants in too strong a fashion to express a word, then I think that is where you will wear yourself out vocally. So, for instance, the first word dark, there's a lovely word there. And on the recording that I listened to, I can see that that's a word that really needs to come across. But the danger is that you can explode on the D of dark, and therefore you put all your energy into that and forget about the color of the vowel. There's a great thing that Harry says, as well as I've said it in my own different way. But basically, the expression is in the vowel, and the inspiration might be in the consonant, but the expression of the word is in the vowel. You sing on vowels, you don't sing on consonants. The whole line is a line of vowels, and so therefore the way you color that word is the way I just went coloured. The C was there, but basically it's the vowel that really puts the expression across. So I'll be looking to try and introduce the idea of really bringing in those kind of things. I think another thing about these phrases that they start off in unison, which will give great strength to them, but then we have to maintain that strength to the end of a phrase, even though the voice has gone into 4 parts. And just by natural things, if you go from one unison part to 4 parts, you've got to compensate a little bit to put that extra strength into those things, so you get that full color of sound there. So those are the sort of things that I was thinking about a lot. And also I was thinking about that for me, I don't know, Karl, you may do correct me, but I felt that Jehovah, that moment in bar 17, feels like a real moment to come across.
Yes.
And so if you use all your voice in full pelt from bar 5 through to bar 17, and you've got nowhere to go to with Jehovah, then you've not quite got it. That's the word that I think that really goes for. And the vowel Jehovah. I mean, yes, we need the J, but that's quite a complex consonant again. Yeah, Jehovah of. And
Yes.
then obviously you've got that wonderful word thunders. You know, again, you can use the vowel there. There's plenty of time because there's that little melismatic, almost small phrase of sopranos, and the length of the note for the in the other voices there. And I'll
Yes.
stop talking for a
No,
minute.
no, this is wonderful. Carl, were you going to say something?
No, I wasn't. I was agreeing.
Yeah, great. Simon, and I think even though it's rather strange that we can't see our audience, I think that it's perfectly fair enough to ask them to sing. Can we maybe just sing a little bit of that phrase through? And I know you've got a keyboard just off screen there.
I don't think I'll get the notes as right.
No, but you can get the starting note.
Oh, hang on, I've turned it off. I'll turn it on again. Okay, so
And
the
maybe we
first
can all
phrase, the soprano phrase is, sorry. Yeah, it wanders around there. What Kim was saying about there's some interesting harmonies in there, so you got to find that. But I think the singing, I'm gonna sing the tenor part for safety's sake. So the earth is full of anger, the seas are dark with wrath. So dark with wrath. I just think there's an awful lot you can do with those words, but you've got to put in the final consonant, dark with wrath. That's got to be there so you can really hear it. I hope that's okay, Karl.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting is how you're using the breath very economically, and yet we're still getting a sense of eroico, that heroic strength and sort of width to your sound as well. I'm just piling you with compliments, Simon, but maybe you could unpack how you're approaching that for us a little.
Because basically I'm after a real full column of sound in my voice, and if I try and do that by putting all my energy into the consonants, I cut out that column. I don't have that full richness. And so in a piece like this, you need that column to really express that, and particularly to colour the words as you go along. So the consonants need to be there, they need to be heard, but the initial consonants must not sacrifice the vocal line by getting in the way of that. That'll give a much bigger sound and that richness of sound.
And what we're talking about here when we're saying a column is airflow, because that's where the sound is being carried. And if you're wasting the air on consonants without being economical, that's where you're going to run into trouble. Is that what you're saying, Simon?
That's definitely what I'm saying. I'm also saying that by doing that, you bring in the whole gamut of all the frequencies in your sound. You know, if you're singing with a column of sound, you're using the brightness of your voice, but you're using that breath to bring in there's the depth as well. That's not weighting it like in a musical theatre way, but it's creating this fantastic rich column of sound that will really carry the sound across.
Simon, would you sing that for us again? And if we did it twice, and people could either join in their own octave, or they could sing their own harmony line against you for a little bit of a harmony experience.
Okay, well, if you want, I'll sing the soprano line, but I might get it wrong. I'll have a go. So it goes, the earth is full of anger, the seas are dark with wrath. I told I'd sing it wrong, because of course it's a C flat, which is the same as a B natural. That teaches you.
Well, there you go. We're all
failed for my sight reading exercise for the day. I've just singing that. One thing that really comes across, actually, just realizing it, because I haven't sung this before, is the word anger. Is the phrase is rising anger, but if you go anger, it's not going to be the same as you would put the word, so that the g needs to be slightly anger. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, it's not very plosive, is it? It's almost just like your middle of your tongue just sort of kisses the roof of your mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, of course, for the sopranos there is it's a rising phrase. So the placing's going to be really anger. The more you think down to those notes as opposed to reaching up to them, the better you're going to find that experience of getting that column.
Yeah, and there's some tricky sort of there are some moments, particularly for the altos, actually, Kim, that are like when you've got a sort of a flat and then suddenly you've got a natural, and that's when sort of keeping that engagement and keeping it on the body is really going to help with the intonation. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I especially with phrases that are going down. So you are really feeling you're lifting all those phrases. It's quite easy for the tuning to go a little bit AWOL on those shapes. Yeah, so I'd be certainly looking at that. Yes. Can I just ask about breathing? Sorry, it's a little bit of a boring question, but I'm sort of assuming that we are breathing at commas in the second bar, or
yes, that's actually probably a good time to say. I know I've seen a few questions in the chat on YouTube, actually a few of you asking about certain notes and where you do take a breath. Make sure that in the learning tracks that you have access to, that you really listen to those have been edited and sung in such a way that that's what we're thinking of at the moment as the perfect performance. I know there's no such thing, but that's what we're aiming for. So I think lots of places for this breath. There's lots of opportunity to use this 5 pound breath. I know those of you in the socials the other day, we did a bit of work on the 5 pound breath, the sort of, as you're saying, Kim, that lift. How do we maintain that, though, rather than the smaller interval movements? How do we maintain that when we perhaps have those larger jumps? For instance, I'm looking at the beginning of, particularly in the bass part, the earth is full of anger, that slightly larger jump. It's very easy to land.
Yeah.
How would you approach when we do have the bigger jumps?
I literally do think of it as lifting. I mean, even you're literally not thinking of it as a downward shape. I really do, and you sort of like scoop yourself up, sort of, so that you're buoyant. Keeping it buoyant, I think, is a good way of thinking about it. And so you won't slide down and go flat, basically. Yeah. So yeah.
And of course, all of that helps with the legato line and the sort of long extended phrases that we're trying to develop in this piece.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say is that again, it comes back to that column, that as much as you think down to the higher notes to get that richness, if you go to the lower notes, you don't dig down to them. You keep that highness that Kim was saying about. I think that maintains that column. About the breathing, I think Kim was absolutely right. We need a breath in that second bar. But if you think of it as an arch of 4 bars, then you're going to find, you'll go through. It's not as if you go and have your lunch after anger to sort of, for a breath. You still think of it as a four. You take the breath, but you think through the phrase. That's important. I think probably, Karl, you probably agree with that as well. That's
all fine. It's all fine.
Cool.
Yeah. Simon, I'm coming straight back to you, actually. Would you, just to experiment with that and demonstrate it so people can sing it along at home, would you sing the first system for us so that the members can either sing with you or sing against you?
Okay, well,
on the tenor line.
The tenor line, okay. Yeah. Okay, I see siren as well.
I'm going to mute myself so I can sing.
I'm going to stand up because I've been sitting a lot today, so I need a little bit of... Okay, so I've broken all the rules, by the way. I've got a really busy background, but this is my working room because this Wi-Fi is good. So I'll count in 3, 3, 1 even. 2, 3, 1. The earth is full of anger. The seas are dark with wrath. Okay, and maybe, I'm not sure if that's a full length there. I think actually in the recording I heard that it should go right into the next bar, Karl, shouldn't it? We could take a quaver out there, but maybe wrath the nations. So yeah, maybe a full length note there. Is that right? Yeah?
Yeah, I'm quite pragmatic about it, whatever you know.
Cool.
I agree that don't you think, Jamie, that it fits really nicely to have that as a full length strong chord going right to the end of the bar? And then what you demonstrated so beautifully then was the TH released the breath on that quaver rest at the start of the second system.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's absolutely. You just need that, but you need to make sure you keep up with the pace of music. You can't take a long time to breathe. You have to make sure you must get breath into your bank account, into your breath account, I call it, your bank account. If you don't have breath, then you're going to get into trouble because you'll get overdrawn. But you need to take it quick enough so you move on. You mustn't delay because these backing tracks keep moving, and if you don't go with them, then you will be left behind. So,
absolutely right. I certainly, as a singer, really believe that breath is just the most important thing for really singing well and informed music. We've spoke, those of you that were in the socials the other day, I mentioned a second ago the 5-pound breath, and I'm sure plenty of you wondering what on earth that is. This was my way of getting a nice released breath and making sure all of the muscles that I need to be helping me breathe are doing their job in the right way without too much tension. I wonder, Kim, if you could talk us about how we can very, very specifically about that breath at the ends of those phrases. What on earth do we mean by a released breath, and how do we get one? To expand on Simon's point.
We're thinking of releasing everything around our back as well as the front of us, I think, and we're keeping our jaw lovely and loose, and our shoulders beautifully broad, lovely space across the shoulders, which just allows the body just to bring the air in without you forcing it in. So you're not gulping air in, you're allowing the air in by just being relaxed and open. And I think that's how I think of it. Even if you've got a really short time to do it in, doing it in a relaxed way with your relaxed jaw beautifully broad across the shoulders, I always try and think, and relaxed shoulders, and then you're just allowing that space to be filled.
Great. In fact, you even just saying that has made me realize the tension I was carrying in my shoulders just now. So good to be reminded, everybody.
It is the shoulders thing is, I mean, apart from the breath, the shoulder thing is so important, I think, and especially as choristers, we're so used to having a folder and a stack of music to sing, and it's terribly easy to just get really tension across here. So
yeah, I agree. I think that I'm going to go up here. Standing is so much easier. I think that 99% of singing technique is actually the thought process. If you think in the right way, then the body responds in the right way. So what I do when I'm practicing phrases with a note like that, or with choirs, I usually do little exercises to keep people singing through that strength of that note. Might seem a bit childish, but if you're singing the word wrath, if you go like that when you're singing it, it's amazing how much the diaphragm commits to supporting. So, for instance, this is going to go terribly wrong now. I can just have a wrath. So you can practice like that using your hands. Hands are a fantastic aid to your singing technique. They will always help you to improve your singing. As is the best teacher in the room is usually the mirror as well.
That's what Eamon Dugan would call your inner chihuahua.
Yes, that's it.
So you have to think of a little dog going bonkers while you're singing.
Well, being a bit of a chihuahua myself, I'm kind to chihuahuas.
Which I believe is now quite a good podcast to listen to.
Yeah.
Apparently so, yes.
Choral geeks amongst us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got what is essentially quite a short modular movement. It's just 2 verses, both of which are marked forte, same melody for both. So all of these things that Kim and Jamie and Simon are talking about apply throughout the movement to both these verses. And when you go through the interlude in the middle and you're preparing to start the second verse, what are some things that singers can be thinking about before they get ready to start that second verse? What kind of things are we resetting? What are we reminding ourselves of so we can keep that beautiful connection to airflow and a really good, strong sound?
I think I would probably be thinking about what the text is I'm going to be singing, and not sort of switching off, actually. And it's quite easy to think, well, I'm not in this bit, so I don't really have to, I don't have to do anything. But actually, I don't know if necessarily online will be the same, but generally, you have to live through whatever music is being performed, and you can't just switch off facially and emotionally as well. So I'd be trying to make sure my shoulders are lovely and loose, and my jaw is nice and loose, and thinking about the space. But I'll also be with music, I think.
Absolutely.
I would say that a very good thing to do is, before anything else, read through all the text. But also, in terms of the second verse, read the second verse first to get a real understanding of where you're going with that. Because when you start a piece of music, you need to be committed right to the end of the piece and all the text. You've got to see the end from the beginning. It's got to go all the way through. And if you kind of run out of steam halfway through because you've not committed to learning that, which I sadly say happens in the professional world, because quite often we have to sight read things, and we do a concert with an afternoon's rehearsal, and we don't always get that idea. Admittedly, if you've got a good conductor, they will help you to bring that out. They will do the gestures to bring you through to the end. But the best thing you can do is explore the text and to the end, and really think about where you're aiming for. See the whole game, not just the beginning of the game at the beginning, but the whole game of the piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we've just had a request for the alto line, because it's very tricky at the beginning, isn't it? The earth is full of anger, the sea is dark with wrath. That's a really tricky starting line. And I wonder, Kim, could you give us any ideas of how you would tackle that, just for our members who are starting to learn it now?
Okay. I mean, the tricky thing is that B flat to the F flat. Again, I would just think up onto that F flat. The earth is full of anger. So you're a lovely ah, and that will keep it up. Yeah. The seas are dark with raw, and that's a big third. That E flat to the G is a huge third, and it feels, so you really need to feel the distance that you're going there. Yeah.
It's
I
a
love-
tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah, I loved Kim's fantastic rolled R on Roth.
Kim, can we have that again?
That was really.
What's the C? Sorry, please.
La-da.
Thank you. The earth is full of anger. And in fact, you might want, I don't know what you think, Tori and James, I don't know whether to put a slight glottal on anger. Full of anger. Just a mini glot.
I think so. I think it always, for me, comes down to the emotion of it. And I think it certainly helps really draw the meaning of that word out. So I'd certainly agree.
Yeah, it comes down to the colour of the word, doesn't it? There's anger. So yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay.
And then I'm going to push you, Kim. I want to hear you sing Roth one more time, because we've also had a query about how you pronounce that. And it's Roth, not Wrath.
Roth. Yeah.
Is that correct, Karl?
Yes, I believe so.
Excellent. Just to check, just to clear that up for somebody who's asking on the YouTube chat.
Okay.
No,
the earth is full of anger. The seas are dark with wrath.
Sung as only an alto can. I've got to say, of all the voice parts, the voice part I want to hear singing Wrath is an alto. Thank you so much. Guys, fantastic to hear all of your tips and tricks for how to approach this piece. We've got 20 minutes left, and we have got the YouTube chat is brimming with questions, both for you singing technical questions and questions for Karl. Jamie, do you want to pick one out of the hat and tell us who's talking?
I will do. Let me have a go. In fact, I will ask one first. There is, I've just seen one about a potential typo in bar 8. Joanna Brown has said, "I've got a D natural in bar 8. Is this a misprint?" Which I believe in the score that we've been working from, I believe she's talking about the altos. We have a G.
I've just noticed that because I think the tenor, Simon, you sang a D in the last
Yeah,
bar.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a B in this score. B natural.
I've got this one here.
No,
Aha.
do with what you've got. It's a G major chord anyway, so
Yeah.
So I think probably the good rule, if in doubt, if you go away here and forget everything you've heard, if in doubt, listen super closely to those guide tracks and practice with them, because you may find there are breaths or phrasings that you haven't performed if you've performed this before. So do have a listen to those. They should contain all the info you need. Now is the time really for that technical little tips and tricks.
The guide tracks were done to the scores that you have, weren't they?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
Toria and James, would you be okay to send us those?
We
Yeah,
can
of
indeed.
course.
Can indeed.
Just so we're on the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We will do. We will do.
Great. Who's asking our first question, Jamie?
There's so many questions here. I'm going to go to Karl. I'd like to ask you from Imogen Solstice. Do you have a favourite among your own compositions? She loves the Requiem, as well as the Armed Man, Dewey Sant, and of course Addie Amos. So, do you have a favourite of your compositions? Tough question to start with.
I don't like any of them very much. That's a strange feeling. I mean, some people think you should, when it's sounding nice, you kind of wallow in it, but you don't. You know, I don't. I always think it could have been done a bit better. Not performed a bit better, but written a bit differently, or orchestrated a bit different. I mean, the Arm Man, because of its success, I have a special spot for. But I sometimes think it's better music in the Stabat Mater, personally. And the last one I did, the Miserere, I think I'd willingly put my name to that. So apart from that, they're all bubbling about the same, I guess. I mean, it's funny enough, there's some music I've written. When I wrote it, I didn't think, well, specific pieces. 3 I can think of that are quite popular. One is the Benedictus here. Another is Pelagia, which is a string. orchestral piece, like a retro Baroque thing. And the other one is Adi Amos itself, the tune, the song. But when I wrote them, I didn't think they were that special. I didn't think, oh, I've got a winner here or whatever. You know, it was okay, and I let it go.
Wow. Karl Jenkins, all bubbling along about the same. What a quote. I have a question from Laura Bissell. She wanted to know a little more about your decision to use the cello in the Benedictus.
A lot of people have complained about that solo because it's players because it's very high. I did a concert with one of the BBC orchestras. I think it was in Leicester, the Montfort Hall, isn't it? And he came up to me before the rehearsal because he hadn't looked at it, and he said, "Of course, you mean this to be down the octave, don't you?" I said, "No, it's written at pitch." So he went away. On another occasion, I've got to say, I did something in Manchester with the freelance band, and the fixer asked the cello section for volunteers to play the Benedictus rather than just best player. So yeah, I didn't really answer your question, does it? But I wanted it to be high and kind of sounding like on the edge, which it is really. So it gives it that tension. And as has been proved with several cellists, when it's played well, it sounds eminently playable. You know, but it has a tension, but it's.
And the cellist on the original recording was Guy Johnston.
Was, yeah.
And who was that? Can you remember who our cellist was from the World Orchestra for Peace in Berlin? Because I remember Charles told me that he was very young and very new to the orchestra.
He was young, yeah. And I've got to get the name for you so that you know it. I've asked that question. I remember I was introduced on the day, but I can't remember what his name was. But he was German.
Gone on to be quite a star, from what I've heard.
Yes, I'm sure. Yes, he has.
Yeah.
I have another question, in fact, for one of the members of the 16 from Lily Meyer, have asked about more vibrato or straight tone, which I think is an enormous, probably hour-long discussion in of itself. But I wonder what your thoughts are on this.
Can I go first, Kim, for a change? Yeah. I think it depends on the music. I don't think we consciously think that often about that. As I say, in this music, it requires a full sound, and so inevitably a good technique is going to have vibrato in it, but not not sort of like that kind of vibrato, but it's going to have a good sound vibrato, not a unsupported breath vibrato. But sometimes it's about really the purity of the music. So if you're doing Renaissance music, sometimes it just really doesn't lend itself to that. But having said that, you could be singing Arvo Pärt and that style of music, and yeah, I'm intrigued. Are you a fan of Arvo Pärt, Karl?
Yes, I like the music very much. Yeah.
Amazing music. Yes.
Vibrato also very much like the effect when the voice starts just straight and then the vibrato kind of comes on at the end of the held note.
Yeah, it's about flexibility, but also being able to do a variety of things. I think. Sorry, Kim. No,
it's fine. I agree. I mean, I think the problem with this particular exercise is that when we sing as a group in the 16, we listen to each other so much, so that we're sort of in sync, with or without vibrato, depending what the phrase is doing. But that's I think one of the big things of singing in choirs is listening. And so as long as you're using your voice well, a vibrato will probably come in at some point, but just to listen to everybody else, I think. So that's not quite so easy in this context, but yeah,
absolutely. I am, Jamie, we've had a call out from Pam Alexander for you to just quickly summarize what the 5 pound breath is.
Oh, 5 pound breath. I think I could talk for hours about breath, so I'll be very, very quick though. This is the idea. This could be in any currency. I say this as someone who lives in London, but as if you've just found 5 pounds on the floor, and it's not such a huge surprise that you go, but it is a big enough surprise that you go, and should hopefully just have a nice silent breath with your face should light up with a little bit of a smile, and that will help with your soft palate raising, releasing all of your lower support muscles, and ensuring all of the points that Simon and Kim, all of the brilliant tidbits that Simon and Kim gave you about breaths are all helped by this idea of before you even breathe, you've given yourself a reason to do so and a thought behind it.
For some reason, Jamie, that reminded me of after a choral pilgrimage where I found a £20 note. And I think it was very useful because I ended up buying the next round, I think. Yeah.
Brilliant.
An amazing question has just come in from Jackie Epps for Karl. She says, the last movement is really uplifting and it looks forward to a peaceful, war-free future, as you've said. Does it make you feel optimistic about, obviously we're in a time at the moment where it's quite easy to feel pessimistic. Do you think we should all be uplifted by this final movement?
It should be. That was the intention anyway when I wrote it, that it's optimistic and it's kind of joyful and uplifting. So that is the emotion that it should express.
And the 5 movements that we've selected to perform, we're not going to be performing all the movements. We're just doing a selection because we've picked, as we discussed earlier, a selection of movements which work together as a whole, but also take us on a little bit of a journey from the dark, quite emotion-laden hymn before action, which we've been discussing in this webinar, all the way through to that optimistic ending. And I think everybody who's taking part in this project has been on a bit of a journey in the last 5 weeks, and we hope that this might be a sort of cathartic experience for people.
Yeah, indeed.
And I'm gonna hand back to Jamie to scout for another question.
I have another one which I would love to know, from Carol Collins. How does Karl start his compositions? Do you do melodies or words first? And someone else, Sarah Edwards, has also asked, it would be lovely to hear if you're currently working on anything else.
Second question first. I've just finished a saxophone concerto for Jess Gillam.
Oh, wow.
Wonderful.
Awesome. But the premiere's been delayed for reasons we all know about. So it'll be next year sometime. So that's just finished. So that's the main thing. And I also written something for a Celtic festival. They chose 5 composers from Celtic regions, which like Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Brittany, and Galicia, northern Spain. Each composer wrote a piece for an orchestra with some soloists, and I found this amazing. He's a Galician pipe, essentially like bagpipe player, with double zone flutes, Irish whistles. So he's a phenomenal virtuoso. So he's the soloist with Catherine Finch, the harpist. So that was my contribution. And what was the first question?
It was, how do you start your compositions?
Depends what it is. If it's instrumental, I'll start doodling around on the piano, whatever, until some idea hits, and then I'll develop it either on the piano or away. And that's takes care of itself as far as I go. I mean, I can't be. It's intuition, but based on a lot of training, really. I don't think too much about it, but when it pleases me, I kind of let it go. With vocal music, which is the bulk of what I've written, it's twofold. With the Andy Amos project and other things I've written in that invented language, it's in conjunction with the music, and the words come at the same time. Because when I thought of Adiemos, it went back to someone asking for a piece of music for a commercial, and I didn't have enough time to research text. So I thought of using words like in scat singers in jazz, like ba-doo bop, ba-doo bop, ba-doo ba-doo bop, ba-doo ba-doo bop, ba-doo ba-doo bop. But where the it's more organized than that. You know, it's so that everyone's singing the same thing. So it's in the sequence of words and phonetics and vowels. And as Simon was saying earlier, sometimes when it's a more tribal sound, I wanted like African, which is singing with, as in the Adiemos, when he's going to do with no vibrato and a hard sound, and you get a lot of hard consonants like ka, ra, da, ma, and then the other kind of ecclesiastical sounds are called, it's like called Latin in a way, and more kind of flowing. But that's a two-way thing. Melody and words are arranged at the same time. And then, of course, when I have text to set, the words are there. So the words are there ready to, it's a peg on which hang a musical coat, if you like. You know, the text have to be, music has to be in sympathy and empathy with the text. And reflect what the text represents, or what the narrative says. So every way is different, but if this text is set, it's the words first. Otherwise, could be anyway.
Yes, and Karl, Clive Higgins would like to know if you've updated the Armed Man, if you've made changes since you first premiered it, and if there were any changes, you know, that you made for a particular reason, or was it just sort of minor edits?
Yeah, there are a couple of bits I want to change, but I'm not going to tell anyone what they are. And it's not in the music. It's a couple of orchestration points that I think would be better. And I meant to do it for this, because this year or last year, was it? This 20? Yeah, it's the 20th anniversary of the piece. So I think a few corners could be tidying up. I had this bad habit at the time. I never, some of the notes hang on to, I'm going to make an issue of it here, but I don't allow breathing. Sometimes you get a minim held onto a quaver, and the quaver is not necessary. You know, I might have three, in a 4/4 bar, so I might have a dotted minim and then a quaver and then a quaver rest. But very often the dotted minim is sufficient. That's simplistic kind of thing. In Benedictus, there are a couple of bits like that. You see them when you come to them. But I suggest what you do there is listen to what you've already done and what's on the tape, and take it from that. That makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
Tori, I think you might be on mute.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Look, we're nearly out of time, but I think we've got time for maybe just one last question. And Jamie, do you want to ask it, or shall I pick one out?
I've actually got one that I think, if I can find it again, would be great as one final singing question about high notes. This is from Catherine Ross, and I can see also that Alison Schroeder has asked a similar question. Are there suggestions you can give for singing the soprano line in the charge later? But she goes on to ask, it's quite a high sustained line, and that she's struggling to sing it when they performed it. I mean, how do you suggest approaching particularly high or extreme ranges?
Just to clarify, we're not actually singing the movement charge, but this is going to be really useful in the Benedictus when you get to the hosannas.
It will indeed.
Do you want to go, Sam?
Yeah, okay. I would say, obviously, I haven't got the score in front of me, and I don't know the movement. So, but I think when you're singing high sustained notes, you've got to maintain that within your voice. You mustn't try and push it all the way through. You've got to be economical with your breath as well. You've got to be able to think all the way through to the end of that note. So I think those are and obviously the placing, thinking down, is really important. Support is really important. That idea is just one idea, but those things are really important to be thinking about. For high sustained notes, you need to be placing the voice really well, and also you need to be thinking about where you're going to you're doing it within your capacity. There's no point. I was talking to one of my students today. I teach singing, and the thing that really the message always comes to me is that the quality is the thing that counts, not the quantity of voice. It's always about the quality, as far as I'm concerned, rather than the quantity. So do it within your capacity to sing a long note.
I think the note in question is an A
Okay, that one.
for sopranos, so it's high, but not.
Yeah, it's not out of this world, is it? No.
Well, next week when we come on to talking about the Benedictus, we've got a singing tutorial with Charles McDougall, where we're going to be talking about how we can tackle those and some tips and tricks for managing those high notes more easily.
Great. Now, I'm aware that we are at 7:15, and just as a very quick wrap up, I've seen a couple of questions from a few of you just about resources and a few other things. So I will do a little bit of housekeeping before passing back to Tori to thank Karl, Simon, and Kim. A few of you have asked about the resources on the website. They are on the website. You've asked where they are. They are on the website. You should now all be able to log in. We're
stayathomechoir.com.
Yes. www.stayathomechoir.com. Any of you that were having issues accessing those bugs should be fixed. But if you have any issues, get in touch at contact@stayathomechoir.com. A few of you have also asked about what you should wear for videos, for example, solid colors. There are instructions at the very beginning of every video. All we ask is that you are in the center of the frame, a little bit as I am now, preferably on a clean wall behind you, if you can, in wherever you are living. And a few of you asked about weekly sessions and the timings that we have. Now, we have a global membership now in the Stay at Home Choir of nearly, I think, 55 countries or possibly more now. So what we have done is we have analysed the percentage of membership from around the world, and we will be moving the sessions each week to make sure we can try and cater to everybody equally. But don't worry, everything is being recorded. Everything will be available after the fact. So if you can't make it for whatever reason, you will be able to catch up a little bit later. And a few of you have asked about the scores. Now, my overriding rule for everything is the learning tracks. If they are on the learning tracks and it is sung in the learning tracks, please sing it like that. I would suggest if you've gone elsewhere, I know we've partnered with Boozy and Hawks, Hal Leonard, and Encoder about offering scores not in the videos. Do go through and check and make sure you've made any markings so that you know how you're going to sing it when it comes to your recording. Back to you, Tori.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Well, oh gosh, I've been spotlighted. Hello. It's been such an informative session for me to get to know this music and to hear from you, Kim and Simon, some technical tips for how to approach it. And Karl, thank you so much for your overview of the work as a whole. And of course, you're going to be with us throughout the process as we go through the 5 movements that we're going to be performing: the hymn before action, Sanctus, Benedictus, Agnus Dei, and the final chorale, God Shall Wipe Away All Tears. So Karl, we really look forward to hearing from you again in the future. And what remains from me is to say thank you so much for joining us in the usual way with jazz hands, which is how we have, because we're normally on mute, we've turned to jazz hands for saying thank you to people. Thanks, Karl. It's been a pleasure. Thank you to Kim Porter, Simon Berridge, Jamie Wright, and of course to Sir Karl Jenkins. And we look forward to you joining us on Saturday for the rehearsal.